Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and Disney's The Acolyte and Grace Randolph's coverage of The Acolyte. Yeah, right, okay, and actually specifically The Acolyte's being canceled by Disney. All right, let's jump into this. So first of all, let's talk about what the situation is. Situation is pretty heavy. It is pretty heavy. So first of all, let's talk about Disney the Acolyte. It recently finished. There were 8 episodes, and it was by far the worst hated Star Wars property in history. I think that's pretty, and where are the receipts? Twitter, man. People just flame the show left and right from the gate. From the gate, there was extremely hot people like saying this is a garbage Star Wars show, right? And not just a Star Wars show, but like this is terrible, terrible Star Wars content, right? And this is a big deal because people have been hating on Star Wars for a long time. People hated on Star Wars the sequels trilogy because they're just like, this isn't good quality, and this doesn't meet the level of quality that we came to expect from George Lucas, who we made his life hack for 10 years. Oh, and then as a punishment to us, the fans, he sold it to Disney as a big old middle finger to all of us that we 100% deserved. So people hating Star Wars content, that's a high bar, and this one high jumped right over that high bar. So Acolyte was despised by the Star Wars community, by a significant portion of the Star Wars community. Okay, now I want to be clear. I did not see the Acolyte, and the reason why is, hey man, it's hard times right now in America. A lot of people don't have money, and inflation is going through the roof. Crime is extremely high, and there's a lot of war. Right? So with that said, I don't have a ton of streaming services, right? So we got rid of it. We had Disney Plus for a long time. I think 3 or 4 years, and we got rid of it. Just couldn't afford it anymore. Couldn't afford to have another streaming service. And by the way, Disney Plus is not as important to us as Netflix. All right, because yeah. So what streaming services do we pay for? YouTube, no ads. I guess they call that YouTube Red, YouTube Premium. Who knows? Whatever the name of it is today, right? And we pay for Netflix, and I think that's about it. I think that's the only 2 streaming services we pay for. We get a bunch of other streaming services who are like, hey, you're related to some, you're connected to us in some other way through your phone or some other thing. And so here's a free streaming service. Like we have like 2 free streaming services, which is pretty nice. So it's pretty interesting. So I never got to see The Acolyte. I wanted to see it, and I would have watched it. I actually think I did watch it. I watched the first 2 episodes. I think they were free or something. But, so anyway. So Grace just did a breakdown. And the reason why we're talking about this is every conversation we've been having on Dungeons and Dragons, just on a different intellectual property. Every single one, all right? It's just every single one, all right? And pretty profound. It's really pretty incredible, right? So should marginalized groups be supported, right? What if supporting the marginalized group means that the traditional group that has liked this product no longer likes it, right? And that's exactly what Grace talked about. She's like, they made this show for a bunch of, and she said it different. She actually did. I'll tell you exactly what she said. People were like, is this a Democrat-Republican split? She said, yeah, 100%. She said, yes, this is a Democrat-Republican split. So she acknowledged this goes right down the blue-red line, okay? Blue Democrat, red Republican. I'm just going to say the colors going forward. So she was like, this is a red-blue split, right? And the red are straight males. Said it flat out, right? And she said, and essentially, this checked a whole bunch of blue boxes, right? Women, LGBTQ. Were there any other else in there? That's it. Right? She's like, the show was made and put women and LGBTQ creators forward, put women and LGBTQ stories forward. And here's where it gets interesting, right? And she said, and this got canceled, right? Now, great. Now, the reason why this is important is Grace is LGBTQ and women bona fide. Like, literally every day, LGBTQ comes on her show and says, "We love you, Grace. You're the best." Actually, I don't hear a lot of women supporting her on there. I don't know if the LGBTQ are very loud about their support for her, right? And I don't know if women support Grace or not at the macro level. I don't know, right? But I know she is LGBTQ bona fide. Like, she got her, she got a badge, right? Like they support her. And so she came out and said, was it, bad to cancel this show? And she did a whole segment on it, right? And she said, no, it was not bad to cancel this show. This show cost I think it was either between 140, 180 million. Like, let's say 140 just to be safe. $140 million, right? Nobody watched it. It got ground over a cheese grater on Twitter. They just tore it apart. And here's where it gets bad. The toxic fandom, that's Grace's term, right? The toxic fandom, they had the receipts, right? They said in episode 1 and 2, this is garbage. These people do not know what Star Wars is. They're going to make the Jedis evil, and this is going to be a betrayal of everything Star Wars is, right? And so Grace really was like, yep, that's what she's like, I liked episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I thought 6 was okay. And then 7 and 8, everything that, basically it went south, and you were like, this really ain't, this isn't kosher with Star Wars. This does not gel with Star Wars. It just doesn't, right? And I was like, that is fascinating. That is really fascinating, right? Like, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty spot on, right? And so, but the important part here is, this is every single thing we've ever talked about on Dungeons and Dragons, all in one bucket, right? So how is it all those things in one bucket, right? Well, we've had the same issues. We're like, hey, we know, and actually, Hasbro put out the numbers a couple of years ago, and they're like, yeah, it's about 60% male, right? I don't think Hasbro don't have the money to check if their people are, straight or LGBTQ, but we kind of know because LGBTQ is like 3% of the population. Now, if you have a better stat for that than me, let me know. But the last reliable stat I heard on that was 3%, right? And so we know, Dungeons and Dragons core audience is straight males, right? And so Grace was like, if you can't deliver, then you have to start making stories that absolutely can honor LGBTQ or women, but the story's got to be for straight males. They have to have ground where they can enjoy it, right? And this cannot continue, right? And the reason why that's important is she has the LGBTQ badge to say this, right? Nobody's going to be like, hey, you're being ignorant or prejudiced, right? Because she's not ignorant of it. She's highly educated on it. She's highly knowledgeable on this topic. Nobody can be educated on it. I don't think there's really enough academic material to even know anything about LGBTQ. Not that's accessible. Again, if you know where to an LGBTQ library, send it my way below. But and I'm sure there is an LGBT, but is there one in every city? Is there one in every town? Actually, is there one in the suburbs? That's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know if that level of academia is mainstream. That's where I was going with that. All right. So this was really fascinating. And I think when we look at this from a Dungeons and Dragons light, we're like, okay, well, how did they, Dungeons and Dragons has been incredibly progressive, definitely has been, making stories for women and LGBTQ for a long time. How did they get away with it and the Acolyte didn't? And this is wild. Listen to this. There was a question that Grace answered, and this is why we're talking about it. She is the best in the business, right? She's like, is this a win for toxic fandom? She's like, yes, this is a win for the toxic fandom. So why was there a win for the toxic fandom on the Acolyte, but there's been no win for the OSR and the Grognards? Why has mainstream people continued to embrace Dungeons and Dragons even as the OSR and the Grognards scream their heads off that, foul play, right? Well, I think the reason why is a couple things. One, I would say Gary was woke and progressive from day one. Like he was, he was like in 1974. He was like way before LGBTQ was even an acronym, right? He was like, hey, you want to be a different gender? Like that was in 1974. So Gary was super woke from day one, right? Then the other thing is they have delivered. They have been successful. The Acolyte did not deliver. Nobody watched it. Everybody hated it, like on Twitter. Every red on Twitter hated it and castigated it left and right, right? And it didn't deliver the views. It was, Disney would have easily been able to ignore all this if it had been a massive hit and everybody was like, I love the Acolyte. And that was very much not the case. It didn't make any of the major charts. Grace covered it for weeks and was like, it's not making the charts. It's not hitting number one. It not in the Star Wars bucket, not in any bucket, not in the, it's getting outperformed by Moana most weeks, right? It's just a 10-year-old rerun, right? And so it was really fast. I was really blown away by exactly how, this and so basically Grace was tackling something that we've been talking about for 20 years on Dungeons and Dragons, and she had the best discussion just in a different area, right? We are and this is the issue, is the reason why Hasbro is getting away with so much woke and so much progressive, which I support, in their product is because they are delivering, right? The Dungeons and Dragons is making more money today than ever. Last year, one minor product, like just one video game, made $1 billion, right? Magic the Gathering, which is now completely marinated in Dungeons and Dragons, right? $1 billion. Like it's bangers, just absolute bangers, right? Like left and right. Everything you rubbed on last year, $200 million blockbuster, right? You just take Dungeons and Dragons and rub it on something like a soap. Oh, last year, listen carefully. Last year, Lego adds Dungeons and Dragons to their themes. Number 1 year in history. Lego has its number 1 year in history when it adds the same year it adds Dungeons and Dragons. Not a coincidence in any way. You rub Dungeons and Dragons on it, it turns into gold. Matthew Mercer, millionaire, just rubbed his face on Dungeons and Dragons. That's all that happened, right? And so that's how Dungeons and Dragons gets away with so much woke and so much progressive, is it does the woke and progressive, and it delivers. It gets the numbers, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a fetch millennium.